This lesson is going to be on how to draw things in two-point perspective that are not necessarily squares or rectangular prisms. Things like cylinders, curved structures, bridges, and organic things like trees, people even, and things of that sort. Okay, so let's say you're going to draw a cylinder and you want a cylinder floating, I don't know, here above the horizon line. So the first thing I would do is draw an oval, not a circle, an oval, because you're seeing things on an angle. You're not seeing it directly up from the front of it. You're seeing it on the side. So I'm going to start with an oval. Okay. And if I want my cylinder to be facing in this direction, then I'm going to take my ruler and line it up to this vanishing point. So the top of my cylinder, or rather the bottom of my cylinder, the very edge of it. So I'm going to take my ruler, I'm going to line it up to this vanishing point, and the very first thing that my ruler touches, right there, I'm going to line that up. And then the top of my cylinder, the very last little bit right there, that's where I would line it up. Okay, so it's going in this direction. And then I'm going to end it wherever I want. I just have to make sure I follow this curve. So rather than having a straight line, I have a curved line. And I want my cylinder to end here. I'm just copying the curve from the front. And that's it. That's a cylinder in two-point perspective. All right. And the way that you shade it is really what's going to make this look round. So if I were to do some shading inside, you know, like a lot of this three-dimensionality will come from how you are coloring your work. All right. But that's something we can go over another time. So that's a cylinder. Let's say I have some buildings that are going to be curved like this. So instead of a straight line, I have a curved corner. You would still follow the same rules. The bottom and the top of your line would still go to these two vanishing points. So the bottom would be lined up to both. And the top of the curve is a little more dramatic than the bottom. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with the cylinder. I'm going to take my pencil, line it up to the vanishing point, and whatever the last little bit is right there, that's what I would line up. Okay. And then line it up to the other vanishing point, the very top of my line, like this. Rule number 2 remains the same. Whatever curve or straight line I have in the front, I have to have the same line in the back. So I have to make sure that I copy this back here. And I copy this in the front. All right, now this can be whatever I want it to be. This, if I were to draw this like 50 times, I could turn them into McDonald's French fries. If I wanted this to be curved, sort of unnatural looking buildings, I could do that. I actually had a student one time turn in an entire city made up of curved organic buildings, and they were done in two-point perspective, but there were actually no straight lines in the entire drawing. Okay, so if this was a building and I wanted to draw, I don't know, a door right here, I would follow the curve that's here. And then the top of my door would follow this diagonal. It would go to this vanishing point. So the top of the door would go to that vanishing point. And there's my door on a curved building. Same thing with windows. I can do a window right here. It would follow that curve. And the top and the bottom of the window would follow the diagonals to the vanishing point. You know what, I have to use a ruler for that one because it's a little bit harder to tell. And then follow the curve here. There's my window. I can add a little frame to my window. I can add, I don't know, curtains, all those little extra details you can add. Okay, let's say I have, we're just gonna keep going with these curves for a little bit, and then I'll show you how to do some other things. Let's say I have the letter S, which has curves in it, and I'm gonna do the letter S. Actually, in order to make it two-point perspective, I first have to put it on an angle, but I'm planning on drawing the letter S and maybe the letter O next to it. So the word so. So I'm going to first figure out how tall I want it. About that tall. And I'm going to give myself a guide. So I'm going to guide it to this vanishing point. And then I'm going to guide it to that vanishing point, and I'm going to use those diagonals to help me make sure it's in 2-point perspective. So now I have my diagonals. I have to fit the letter S on sort of a slant to fit inside of these guides. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of a guide. So the S, I have to make it kind of fit inside of this guide. So curves like that. Okay, and now it's, I'm going to make it a block letter S, so I have to kind of sketch it out so that these lines are even. That's pretty close. Okay, now the confusing part are those flat lines. Normally in the letter S, like if you had a block letter S like this, these horizontal lines now go to the vanishing point. So instead of straight across, they're going to follow this diagonal. So I'm going to make sure it's parallel to this, like that. Same thing here, parallel to this. Okay, so that's the front of the letter S. Now in order to make it look three-dimensional, the sides will go to this vanishing point. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to find all of the corners and make sure that they're lined up. All right, so I'm going to first line it up to the left vanishing point, and then the first thing that this ruler touches, which is the edge here, line it up. Keep going. Here's another corner. Line it up. Always, always have it on that vanishing point. Next corner, line it up. All right, now these curves are inside the letter, so it wouldn't really make sense for me to draw a line here because it's inside the letter. But this curve is outside of the letter. Line it up. Keep going. Let's see, there's another curve here, and it's outside of the letter, so I'm going to draw it in. Make sure it's lined up correctly. Okay. Keep going. You see a corner here. It's outside of the letter, so I'm going to draw it in. Keep going. Here's another corner, but it's inside the letter, so I'm not going to draw that. And the last little bit the ruler is touching is the edge of the S at the top. Line it up. Okay, so I have a whole bunch of diagonals here. Anything that's inside the letter, I'm going to leave blank, and I'm not going to draw it in. Anything outside of the letter, I'm going to complete my rules of 2-point perspective. I'm going to use a marker for this so you can see how it looks without these pencil guiding lines. Okay, so I'm going to keep this one, and I have to decide how wide I want the S to be. You know, I can have it like super wide, or I can have it more narrow. I'm going to maybe put an ending line right here. This is where I want it to end, and I'm comparing it, making sure it's parallel to this part as well. Okay, and now this is where I started, so I'm going to keep this thickness all the way around the S. So I'm going to go back in that corner and copy this curve. Okay, keep this width. There's no corners here, so I'm going to have to kind of like freehand that part. There's no corners, no diagonal lines going to the vanishing points. So I'm going to just freehand it and try to keep this thickness like that. And keep this thickness here, so this wide. I'm going to copy that curve. So copy the curve and end it where I have those diagonals. I think that's it. Okay, now since I did that on marker, I'm going to go ahead and erase the rest of the guiding lines so you guys can see how my 2-point perspective S looks. Ha! I missed one little line right here. And right there, forgot about those. Okay, there's my 2-point perspective S. Let's do that again now with an O. Just for practice, I'm going to do an oval because you see it on a diagonal, right? It's not going to be a perfect circle if you see it on a diagonal. Like that. So that's the front of it, and then the side of it would go to the left vanishing point. So again, I'm going to line it up to the vanishing point, and the first thing that it touches is right there. Keep going right there, but this is inside the letter, so I'm not going to draw it. This one, but it's inside the letter, so I'm not going to draw it. This one is outside of the letter, draw it in. Okay, and I'm going to try to retain the same thickness here. So I'm going to do this one as well in marker, and then erase the line so you can see it more clearly. And keep that thickness, so about this thick, and I'm following the original curve. There's my 2-point perspective. Oh, let's see what else. What if I wanted to have some organic things that you would see outside, like a street lined with a bunch of trees? So in order to draw a street, let's say I want a street in between this building and this S, so like right in between here. I'm gonna first draw the street and then I'll show you how I would do the trees. Line up your ruler to the right vanishing point and make sure that it's in front of the building. That'll be my first street line. Okay, and then the thickness of the street cannot go past this S, the bottom of the S, so I'm going to make sure it ends like right here. Line up the ruler to the right vanishing point. Like that. So here I've got my street going in between, and you can do those, you know, those dash marks, that's up to you. And let's say I have trees lining the street, like you would see if you were to drive through a neighborhood, there's always trees kind of lining the street. So when you first draw a tree, it's just freehand. Trees don't have corners. They are not geometric. They do not go in perspective. So I am straight up freehanding this tree. There's a little bit of grass, you know, some fluffy branches. So what I would do, if you do want to include a tree into your project, I would look up a picture so that you draw it more realistically. So at least something kind of like this where it has some details, some branches. Please don't draw a tree that looks like this. Okay, this is elementary school. You guys are not in elementary school. So nothing overly simple like that. Okay, look up a picture. Now let's say I needed to be lining the street. If these trees were lining the street all the way down, they would get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So while I did freehand this tree, if I want more of them going to the distance, I'm going to take my ruler and line it up to the very top of the tree and give myself a little bit of a guide. Okay, so here's my line. So any tree I draw along the street here, let's say I'm going to draw one back here, I have to make sure that it doesn't go past this line. It has to be much smaller, much shorter. So if I draw a tree back here, it's much, much shorter. So the only thing that's done in 2-point perspective with organic things like trees is just the height of it, if you want it to go back into the distance. But the tree itself is just straight up freehanded. Okay, that goes with people as well. If I were to draw a person here, the person has nothing to do with 2-point perspective. I would just make sure you look up a picture so the person looks realistic. You know, you're not doing this. No, you're not in elementary school. But those don't have corners. People don't have corners. You just freehanded. Flowers, freehand. Clouds, freehand. Not everything is in perspective. Now, let's say I have a bridge and I want the bridge to go over this street. Okay, and that has to be done in 2-point perspective. So what I would do is it should go on an angle that way. So I have to kind of plan it out a little bit. So I'm going to first decide about how tall I want the bridge to be. So let's say I want the bridge to be this tall. Don't worry, I'm going to make it into a curve, but I first need to give myself a bit of a guide. So the bridge is going to start here, line it up to the left vanishing point. Okay, right vanishing point. I'm just using the street as my guide. And the top, so you do kind of, very often you do start with a rectangular prism and that kind of becomes your guide. All right, and the bridge, I'm going to try to keep consistent how far away it is from the street. So the bridge should end like right here. Okay, so that's the front of my bridge. And I'm going to alter this. All right, the bridge is going to be curved. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, all right, the leg here is going to be this wide, but then I'm going to have it go into a curve. The trick is that the curve is not going to be like, you know, like this, where it's even. It's going to look more like this because you're looking at it on a diagonal. So this is going to be more skewed and this is going to be a little bit wider. If you're having a hard time freehanding it, there is a way to make it like perfectly centered in 2-point perspective. In order to do that, you draw an X from corner to corner. Okay, and where you have this middle, lead it all the way up. So keep it parallel to the piece of paper. Have a line going just directly up like this. This is the middle of the bridge. That's where the very tippy top of that curve should be, okay? So you can see if I try to use that as my guide, see how it kind of looks like this one? So if you want to be super accurate, you can do that X instead of freehanding it. So that's the hole for the bridge where the cars are going to drive under. Okay, this is the leg, and I want to give it a railing and maybe a path. So I'm going to give this bridge some thickness. It could also be a tunnel, but I'm going to make this a bridge. So the bridge is going to be, I don't know, maybe that's made out of like bricks or stone or something. I don't know. You can give it some texture, make it look like bricks. Okay. And there's like a path here that's going to go up. I will do the very tippy top of my bridge to the other vanishing point because you wouldn't see this person walk. You wouldn't see the path on this side. You would just see it on this side, right? You're looking at it on an angle. So I'm going to line this up to the vanishing point. Okay, so whatever this path is, it would end here. You wouldn't see it on the other side. I'm gonna have to do a lot of erasing after I outline it with this marker. All right, so here's my bridge. It's made out of bricks. Here's the path, okay? And then I'm gonna maybe give it a railing. So let's do a railing. Do I need a railing? I probably need a railing. Yeah, let's do a railing. Okay, a railing would be straight. So I'm gonna do a line straight up. And it would follow this. Follow the curve of the bridge. And then it would kind of, it'd be hard to see, right? Because it's going on an angle, so it gets skinnier back here. But if you do lines that are perfectly vertical, like spindles, wrought iron spindles on railing, you know, that would look like a railing. So vertical spindles. And then it's hollow in here, so you would still see the street in there. So there's a lot of lines going on here. I'm gonna use my my pen here to outline the stuff I wanna keep so you guys can see it a little bit more clearly, and then I can erase. So I'm gonna keep the street that's going inside of, underneath the bridge, then the actual bridge part, then the railing, which I probably should have made it a little bit taller, but that's okay. Okay, and then the path, I'm gonna keep that, and it kind of disappears right there. And then the rest of my railing, and then I'm gonna go ahead and draw in a bunch of spindles. And then that person is just walking up the bridge. If you're gonna draw people, I would look for images, source images online, or take some pictures of people so that they look accurate and proportional, unless you're doing like a purposefully cartoony design. Like if you're gonna draw anime characters or video game characters, or I don't know, whatever you wanna do, SpongeBob characters, just make sure that they look like that. All right, so I'm gonna erase all this extra stuff. Okay, so there's a bridge that goes over that street. I just made this up. If you find a picture of a bridge where you see the corner of it and you see these two diagonals, you can use that as your source. Oh, you know what? You would see the bottom of it too, right here. Yeah, that's where it ends. You can use that as your source, but I just sort of made this one up. Okay, so here are a bunch of examples of how to draw things that don't necessarily have obvious corners like this and aren't boxy looking. They're still done in 2-point perspective with a few things freehanded. I hope this helps. Let me know if you want me to show you something else.